on this day, September 18, 2023. Are there any previous things that we need to bring up before we start? I'm sorry.
Introduce yourselves and whether or not.
All right. Okay. All right. My name is Tom Halliday. Live here in the west end of Provo City.
I'm Eric Chase. I have no conflicts.
Andrew Rennick, no conflicts.
Oh, and I have no conflicts. We'll start with item number 1. Roger and Virginia Garland request an appeal to the Board of Adjustments of staff interpretation of accessories use for an R1 family residential zone, section 14.10.020.5, related to the denial of a building permit on a residential lot located at 2958 North Iroquois Circle. All right. Iroquois Circle. Rock Canyon neighborhood, Dustin Wright. Go ahead, Dustin.
Thank you. So is that on right there? Got a green light. Can you guys hear me? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So this property that we're looking at today, they submitted a building permit to the city for a lookout tower as an accessory structure.
Can we get it louder as possible?
Okay, we'll give this a try. Is that okay? So the applicant has submitted an application to the city for this property to have an accessory structure built for a lookout tower, and the city staff reviewed the application and determined, based on the ordinance here on the screen, that the property did not comply with, or the proposal did not comply with the ordinance, in that it states that it needs to be something that's customarily used in conjunction with the principal structure, which would be the single family home. And we have not had a lookout tower ever submitted as an accessory use in a residential neighborhood. And so the city staff denied the building permit, and the property owner has appealed that decision. So it's come before the Board of Adjustment for you guys to consider an appeal on staff's determination to deny that building permit. And so your job would be to look and see if staff made an error in our determination of following this ordinance for accessory structures in a residential neighborhood. And the applicant in their application has submitted some of the site plans and renderings of what they were proposing. So the property is a large property with an existing home, and they're proposing to put an accessory structure on the part at the top of the screen right there. That would be fairly close to that property line at the top of the screen, where there's a neighboring properties on the other side. Here's some other things that they submitted showing what the structure would look like. And so that's what I have. If you have any questions for me now, I'd be happy to answer those.
A couple of questions, and mostly they're just to clarify and make sure that we are identifying the right kind of question, at hand. First, it says in the report that if the Board of Adjustment determines the lookout towers are permitted accessory structures, then staff would have to also allow them on other residential lots in the city and not just on this property. Given that, I think we're, a quasi-judicial but non-expert body, we rely pretty heavily on staff to provide kind of, accurate interpretations of law. I have concerns about that though, because my understanding is that as a non-precedent setting body, that would not be the case, and therefore not what we're deciding today, that there would be some kind of running rule around towers.
Yeah, so essentially the way we look at it is the code has an outline of what's allowed and not. So up here on the screen, it's telling us as city staff and the public and all those interested parties what exactly we're looking for. And so in interpreting those codes, we carefully go through them and make our determinations. So in this case, we determined as staff that a lookout tower didn't meet the ordinance requirements here, and that it's not customarily used.
Sure.
And so the appeal before you is saying that that yes, the code, this ordinance here in front of you does allow those type of uses or structures in this zone. And so if that's the decision that the board makes to recognize a lookout tower as a permitted use for an accessory structure, then moving forward, when we receive those type of applications, we would take that
Into consideration.
into consideration in our reviews.
Okay, I guess that's good to know, because I was under the impression that kind of decisions here were constrained largely to case by case rather than kind of having any kind of enduring reference back. So then safe to then understand that we're largely being asked to interpret what customarily means.
Mr. Endick, I think you're combining your typical role of hearing variances with this request that's an alleged error of a staff interpretation. So with the variance situation, that's true. One variance doesn't necessarily set a precedent for somebody else. They're very site specific. In this case, as Mr. Wright has said, we're interpreting code. And if you interpret the code in favor of the applicant, then the staff would follow that interpretation.
Perfect.
For other
Okay.
people.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that clarification.
So is that the customary way to bring forth something like this bill? Or is it a better route to work through city planning and things of that nature to try to clear codes up? We try to be very fair with people, and we try to treat everybody the same. And so what we would tell anybody in this type of situation is that they have two avenues available to them. And this applicant was told this exact thing. They could either go through the legislative process of amending the code to make it clear as to what customarily used means, or that would have to go through Planning Commission and City Council, and that would be an amendment to code. Or they could, if they think the staff has erred in our interpretation, they can come to you and make that argument as an alleged error. So those two alternatives were given to this applicant, like we would do pretty much with anybody else in this similar situation. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Anybody else have any? Okay, I believe it's right for the applicant to come forward now and to deliver. Hello. Hello. State your name.
My name is Gene Robison, Vice President of Robison Home Builders, Inc. And we are the applicant, and just for the property owner is Roger and Virginia Galland. it was mispronounced when you said it, so just to make sure. And we do want to acknowledge that we've met with staff twice. They did explain to us the rules. We're not trying to change the code because we have a unique piece of property. And I think you were all furnished maps in your stuff, in your information, right? And where that, the one thing it doesn't show on there is how the lookout tower will sit in relationship to the adjacent property. Would you like to see that? I have copies for you if you'd like to. Because it would have. The reason we opted to come before the Board of Adjustments is because it does go to an interpretation of the code. That one little line right there that it says, such permitted accessory uses and structures include, but are not limited to the following, is where we're coming from. I don't know that there's ever been a permit turned in for a lookout tower in Provo. I've been doing this for over 40 years and I've never had one before, but I've never had within the city boundaries a 3-acre parcel of ground with the type of slopes that we're dealing with. This lookout tower is 40 feet below the other buildings on our property, and it's looking over the top of the adjacent houses. It's not looking into their windows or anything. And so, but not limited to opens up a whole point of dialogue is it's not limited to just these buildings. And so the lookout tower was a new thing. And we were led to believe through our previous conversations with staff, or we wouldn't have gone to the expense of getting it drawn and engineered. And they've explained all that to us that, you know, it's just an on the cuff thing. And so it goes through the building permit process. And we went through that process and it was denied. But we're coming back to, but not limited to. That doesn't mean that it can't be included in there. Any questions?
Staff have questions? I have one. You say that you feel that you got clarify what you were saying. Did you said that at first you felt like you were given the go ahead or something?
We were not given the go ahead. We met with a member of staff.
I was involved in this. I'm Corey Robinson, president of Robinson Home Builders. So the architect that we're working with on this project, he came in and met with a Jared Weaver, who actually no longer works here, is what Mr. Pepperoni has told us. But he met with him, sat down, showed him this site plan and said, hey, this is what we are proposing we would like to do on this property. And our architect was given not the green light, but said, hey, I don't see why this wouldn't be allowed. Pointed to this code. And so then our architect took that to our homeowner and they went on to, you know, create the plans, spend significant amount of money in planning, architectural, engineering. And then when we turned into a building permit, it was denied. And then that's when, you know, we've gone and met with the Mr. Pepperoni and his staff.
And obviously, I'm not sure that just by approving this, because I agree with Mr. Rennick, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. It should be. Our piece of property is different than someone else that doesn't have the room to put it. So we're asking that the Board of Adjustments look at it from that point of view, how it sits on the property, where it sits on the property, and where it's at in relationship to the other buildings on the property, and see how it doesn't affect the whole city.
question, in this piece that we're trying to interpret, it speaks to, customarily used in conjunction with or incidental to a principal use or structure. I'm curious if, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of buildings that have been approved, clearly in the past.
Correct.
When I think, principal use, R1 zone, I'm saying, it's a single family house. You live in it, you have a yard, grow a garden, you play with your dog. I'm curious, like, there are a lot of other structures on here. Is this connected to any of the use of any other structures or?
It is independent completely from the principal use of the structures. It's an independent structure all by itself, 70 feet away from the nearest structure.
I guess I'm asking, like, well, let me ask this. Do you know what the intended use of this is?
Lookout.
Solely for a lookout tower. It is, the house is in a beautiful. Yeah, so the property's on a beautiful piece up on the East Mountain. Up, if you get some elevated views, you can see the entire valley, and that's all we're trying to capture.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. That was my.
Yeah.
Were any of you able to drive by and look at the property before this meeting?
I wandered around on Google Maps or Google Earth. You kind of took a peek that way, which is outdated, but I did take a peek.
Okay. Because it is a unique piece of property. It's on a sloping hill where all these structures are kind of independent one with another. They're not connected in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Is there anyone online or anyone here that wants to?
I could give you insight behind this project a little bit as well.
State your name, please.
My name's Jacob Madison Galland, and I live at that property. This is my brainchild. I love pine trees more than you guys want to hear about. And the neighboring property, this was my childhood residence. He passed away, and I bought the property from the family. The primary reason for buying the property was to preserve the trees. Now, that was in 2 parcels. The original home, at which a barn, we've called it, has been put on the property. It's a beautiful upgrade to the property. The other parcel, which is about 1.2 acres, has been a non-landscaped, non-watered weed hill since always. As a matter of fact, the south-facing slope had concrete from the driveways that have been demoed in that cul-de-sac. It just had concrete stacked against the hill to keep it from eroding. Before what Corey referenced, we pinged the city. I'm sorry, I don't have specifics on it, but the intent was to beautify that hillside with the intent to have a lookout tower. My wife and I have ties to the south. I don't know if you've spent any time in Florida, but they actually have these for firemen. They have these towers to get above the trees and to be able to view. They've kind of are iconic in style and look. A landscape architect, very professional, very qualified. This was his idea. He said, I think it might be worth it to buy that hill if you're willing to improve upon it. It is such a beautiful, unique property. The trees are so beautiful. This would add.
That's, what is it, a 15-minute? Yeah. So just hurry.
Or It has been beautified. There's been extensive work to put grass on that entire hillside. There's been extensive work and amount of money in preserving the trees. That south-facing slope, if you go by it and compared it to photos, there has been major boulders brought in, trees added to that. So to great expense, the entire neighborhood has been beautified in a way that it hasn't seen in 40 years. And so the intention of that, he is right. It does not look in on any neighbor. As a matter of fact, I see skate drop-in towers around town that are exceed in height. So the intent is just to beautify the neighborhood. I did spend $46,000 in design. The only feedback we got was to shorten it by 3 feet. That was an additional $10,000 in cost to do that. We didn't totally understand that, but we want to be compliant. And we're not looking to change any rules, but we spent quite a bit of money, time, and effort. And that whole entire hillside has been beautified. And it's just my opinion. I know it's not what this is about, but this adds to the beauty and uniqueness of Provo City and that property, and is beautiful visually to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm the one that, should I give you my name?
Sure.
It's Klein Nelson. I'm the one that exactly behind the where this tower is going to be built. And first of all, I'd like to thank Board of Adjustments, Provo City Development, and the others for everything they do. We are the Nelsons, like I said earlier, and there were the properties behind the Galvin Lookout Tower. The Gallons plan on building it about 35 feet tall, which is about 3 times as tall right there. I've measured it. 3 times that wall right over there. And 6 times taller than me. 6 feet tall, 6 times taller than me. And we'd be located within 10 feet of my property line. Is it going to be eyesore? It definitely will be for me and our family. Why so? Other than being tall and inappropriate and unsightly for residential area, it's also greatly diminished the value of our property. On the top of this could potentially be a stepping stone to building a zip line with additional towers spread throughout, which would further lower the value of our property. Currently, I've been able to sit outside of my house on the property line for the last 30 years. I've had the joy of looking at distant views and the sky and just seeing the beauty out there. But now, within a few feet of me, I'll be looking at the Gallon Lookout Tower instead. And prior to that, my parents did own that property. And it was really well developed, and it was really beautiful, and the hill was always mowed. And there was a mansion that lived there before he moved in, before Madison came in and built his shed and his barn. With the Gallons what the Gallons should do is not build the Gallon Lookout Tower. At this point in time, they have not built anything near their own property line anywhere that is so tall and something so big, except for what they are now planning to do. Except this time, it will be bordering our property. And yes, they will be able to look on the back of our property right where we.
Okay.
Can I continue on? Can you do it for another 10 seconds? But I'll keep it short.
Just keep it real short.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll read fast. As Gallons considering themselves as being good neighbors, as a good neighbor, the Gallons should go out of their way to be a good neighbor and be rethinking of building the Gallon Lookout Tower, or else build as close to their own backyard as possible if approved by Provo City. I mean, there's never been a lookout tower approved ever. And why don't they build on the back of their house instead of right in the back of my yard? And I have no other things to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to come forward?
Hello, my name is Dr. Zan Andrea, Dr. Z to be easy. I live just across the street from them. We have been suffering from morning to evenings, all of their noise, the dust, the bulldozers being dust and those rocks all over the place. Please do not allow this monstrosity to be built. It is an eyesore and it's gonna be spying everybody around them, including our home. So please negate this. This 5 o'clock, there is no one besides 2 or 3 of us from that region to come over here, express ourselves or opinion. 5 o'clock is not a good time for the whole neighborhood to be here. A lot of parents still getting their kids from school, going about their business, and this is unbelievable that you're going to put a 5 o'clock for a hearing this important. Please negate this thing. It's an eyesore, monstrosity on top of monstrosity. Please do not do like Provo. Remember that? What up? Yes. So please negate this thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Talbot. I live in an adjacent circle, and my feeling is that caution would be the better course of action in this instance. I do appreciate zoning laws. I think that they do protect the interests of the community, and while I think it's a very good idea to consider appeals and even to consider exceptions in extraordinary incidences, I think that exceptions ought to be granted only when there is an obvious, clear need to which everyone involved, including neighbors, assents. Part of my concern is not just for this individual instance, but for the idea of precedence. So my sense is that when a city council upholds a zoning ordinance, as you did, the defending the citizens of the city. And while on the one hand, there may be instances in which exceptions be granted, it's a risky affair because every exception runs the risk of eroding public trust and of undermining the purpose of zoning instances in the first place. So it's perfectly likely that in any number of instances, it makes sense to grant an exemption. I'm just very wary of instances in which where there isn't an obvious case of urgent need or other type of benefit. I'm wary about the idea of setting a precedent and so forth. I do like to think that while it's nice for me and for everyone else who owns a lot in Provo and a house to stand on it, to be an owner and to enjoy great freedom to do more or less what we like to do on it, we also hold our houses and our property in trust for our neighbors who have a stake in it and for anyone who may come after us. And so that's the principle. I'd urge caution. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Wright. I am the chair of the Rock Canyon neighborhood. The city no longer recognizes neighborhood chairs, but I'm still functioning. And I sent out information about this lookout tower and have received nothing but negative feedback. But one of the things that concerns me is this is a unique property because it seems to be the home of a helicopter or two. And that is a nuisance to the Rock Canyon neighborhood. I don't know how they got permission to have helicopters in a neighborhood, but they fly over our homes regularly, and it's just a nuisance to us. So I'm not in favor of giving them anything more. Thank you.
Thank you. No, just one time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is there anyone else that'd like to come forward? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is there Anybody online or anything? Okay. Would you like to come forward?
One of the concerns that, my name is Connie Taysom, and I live in the Rock Canyon neighborhood. Concern is, if they're allowed to have a tower, as far as the structure is concerned, they are going to need to disrupt the ground by going at least as deep into the ground to stabilize that tower. And it may just be soil. It would have to have footings and everything that, and there'd be more construction time. But like has been previously mentioned, I'm concerned about this being a precedence that if they decide to change the decision that's already been made by the city, that it will allow others to build whatever they would like to build on their property, not just an isolated, this particular structure on a property, but that it will allow other people to come to the city with other types of structures on their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward? Okay, I think we'll close this part of our meeting and we'll go to talking among ourselves. So, thank you.
Well, I'm happy to start off our discussion. I think my biggest hang up that I'm trying to it is this question of trying to what does customarily mean in the face of something that has been kind of identified several times as kind of a one-time. No one's ever asked for this before. I understand how that might be captured, of course, in the but not limited to. So we're open to lots of different things, but without kind of being able to point to, yeah, this is something that people do, in properties of this size or in this, that sort of thing. I'm struggling to see how that could be construed as customarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the same thing about if it's the first of its kind, how can it be customarily? How can that be the custom? And I'm not familiar with everybody's customs and anything, but if we're telling the staff that we don't think this is the way that should be interpreted, if we think people by custom should be allowed to build lookout towers anywhere in the city, I don't know that I'm comfortable making that decision and not having it be explicitly stated, having gone through the planning commission and the council process.
Yes, it seems to me that this is so unique and so much different than anything we've seen here that it's maybe not the right setting to be trying to set a precedence of any kind. I think there's correct channels to be able to find the right uses for new kinds of structures, new things on property that that are so much different than what we've seen. Legal, do we have any backing as far as is this gonna be a situation where things of this nature and are gonna have more of an opportunity to just go forward and be built?
Well, and I'm not sure if this is on or not, is it? This one? Here? Well, certainly I can't, predict the future of what people would be asking for, but certainly if you declare that the interpretation was an error, then that gives weight to the idea that that this particular sort of tower is allowed by the code, and bluntly, given that it is, as far as we know, unique, that does seem to suggest a sort of, generally opening up the possibilities of interpreting things broadly, because now there's an example of it. I'll also say that if you're going to allow anything, even though it does say, but are not limited to the following, you're still going to need to find some sort of at least semi-concrete basis, meaning that if you take that totally limited, then you can just say that anything conceivably could be, whereas I think that's more just sort of an efficiency. This section references other sections. I don't want to think that if you read through these, several subsections, everything there is to know. It does point elsewhere. So it's the extremely broad interpretation was just from a statutorial interpretation standpoint, it's not workable or feasible, really.
I have a question for the staff. Are heights of accessory buildings are tied to the height of the main structure? Is that right? That the limit on how high an accessory building can be built is dependent on the height of the main structure?
Correct. Yeah, the accessory structure can't be taller than the main dwelling.
Okay, and is that just elevation or height from ground?
It would be height
top?
from its location.
Okay.
So on a property that has a structure that's lower in elevation, we just measure the height of that structure, and then the accessory structure, we'd measure the height of the structure where it's located. So elevation's not part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
It looks like to me that this is actually higher than well, maybe not. Maybe it's, oh, okay. I didn't look far enough. Yeah. Okay. Lower than the home.
I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm prepared for a motion, but certainly happy to, continue to discuss as anyone has things.
You have anything, Eric?
I don't have any.
Well, if anyone has a motion ready.
So I will make a motion that the board accept the staff recommendation to deny a building permit as requested at 2958 North Iroquois Circle, North Canyon neighborhood. Finding that staff interpreted the statute correctly.
I will second.
Okay, we'll take a vote then. Andrew?
Andrew Rennick, aye.
Eric?
Eric Chase, aye.
Tom Halliday, aye. We have a unanimous vote to uphold the findings of the Board of Adjustment, or excuse me, the staff board on the Provo City Code that this trying to find the right word so I stay right, excuse me. That this building permit be not given or passed. And okay, we'll have a motion to close.
Second.
This concludes the Board of Adjustments for September 18th, 2023.